Good evening. A show of unity at NATO's 70th anniversary gathering, embodied in the traditional end-of-meeting statement, has been overshadowed by footage of the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in conversation with other leaders, apparently mocking Donald Trump. The president responded in a press conference by calling Mr Trudeau two-faced. It came after testy exchanges yesterday between the US leader and France's president, which underlined tensions over NATO's future direction. Our deputy political editor John Pienaar was at the meeting, and his report contains some flash photography.
He loves to make a big entrance. Whether or not he's always completely welcome. Donald Trump may not always be looking for trouble, but it often turns out that way. He needs careful handling, and everyone knows it. That includes his host, who's fighting a campaign.
The Honourable Donald Trump, President of the United States of America.
The leader of the free world had already fallen foul of NATO allies and strayed into the election. He's not a man to take directions. When it came to the UK's most powerful ally, Boris Johnson was treading very carefully today. The President of the United States has spoken of his admiration for you. Do you believe that as a leader and as a man that Donald Trump is good for the West and good for Britain? And if so, why?
Well, I certainly think, John, that the United States is the guarantor of, has a massive contributor to NATO, and you know, if you want evidence of the willingness of the United States to stand shoulder to shoulder with us, I would point you back to what happened in the case of the poisonings in Salisbury. America stood shoulder to shoulder with us then, has done for decades, and is an invaluable ally and continues to be so.
What about Mr Trump himself, though, Prime Minister? Well, you were seen mocking.
Let's be clear. This was under the current US administration, and they were shoulder to shoulder with us.
But here he's sharing a joke at Donald Trump's expense last night, enjoying Canada's leader's take on the US president's timekeeping. Then he mimicked the shock of White House staffers at Mr Trump's off-the-cuff diplomacy this week. Britain's PM had heard it all, but he was pleading ignorance.
That's complete nonsense, and I don't know where that's come from.
But this was Donald Trump's verdict on the Canadian leader.
Well, he's two-faced.
He's two-faced, he said, obviously not at all happy. Pomp and ceremony at the summit here in Hertfordshire, while in Nottingham, Labour's leader seemed a world away.
Number 10!
Jeremy Corbyn's vision, a NATO dedicated to peace.
I thought the direction NATO was going was a wrong one. I've had discussions with many people, and I want to see a reduction in tensions around the world, because we cannot go on developing in the concept of an arms race. There has to be a process of recognizing the real threats in this world are actually terrorism, cybersecurity, and of course the climate crisis that affects all of us, and I think we can all play a part in dealing with those issues.
The rival leaders are offering very different visions of Britain's future, from Labour's radical socialism to the Tories' Brexit, with or without a deal, and an option to stop Brexit altogether on offer too. The country's economic, political, strategic future all up for grabs in an election which could come to shape or reshape the country and the lives of everyone in it. Summit over, Boris Johnson had walked into a diplomatic tangle. If there is a next time, he'll hope for better. John Pienaar, BBC News, Hertfordshire.
Well, our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins is here with me now. James, that was a sour ending to a tense gathering, but overall, how did NATO emerge from this?
Well, this was always going to be a fractious gathering, I think, a bad-tempered one, given that there are substantial disagreements about NATO's future purpose, its priorities, its ability to deliver. But in fact, at today's formal session of the 29 leaders, there were some successes too. They averted a major crisis, heading off a threat from Turkey to block a plan to boost the defences of the Baltic states against a Russian threat. In exchange, President Erdogan of Turkey got some language on terrorism that, although it wasn't enough for him, at least satisfied him for the moment. They made some moves to declare space a new operational domain for NATO to try and meet any challenge there. They buried some of their disagreements, but they made progress with others. They declared China a potential challenge, a worry. But I think behind all this, Donald Trump was, as he so often is, the key player. He castigated members not paying enough, as he sees it, for their defence. He pointedly invited to lunch those who met the spending criteria that NATO has set. And I think it was very typical, this meeting, of the sort of international gatherings we've come to expect in the Trump era. Democracies falling out with him and, frankly, any sort of world order under a great deal of pressure.
Okay, James, many thanks.